Thank you all for joining this episode in the Bullhorn Basics webinar series. This session is Systems Changes to Improve Reporting and Data Integrity Part 2. So for those who attended all of the sessions in the last series last year, we did a similar webinar covering various areas between analytics, automation, and ATS. This is to just kind of further that subject matter and cover slightly different areas. So as a little bit of housekeeping, this session will be recorded and the recording will be made available afterwards. You'll be able to find it through the hub, where you can go through and look at all of the previous recordings of all of the basic webinar series. In the audience, you guys will be muted throughout the session. Please use the Q&A function on Zoom if you do have any questions. So there isn't going to be a dedicated Q&A session at the end of it, same as we didn't do on the last one. Instead, if you do have any questions throughout, we would encourage you to actually ask via the chat function. We've invited quite a few people onto the panel to be able to answer those questions if they do come in. So in terms of the presenters, you have myself. My name's Alex Brewer, and I am the Customer Success Team Lead in charge of Bullhorn Analytics. You have got Adam Lewis, who is Customer Success Manager on the ATS side, and you have Tom Washington, who is in Customer Success on the Bullhorn automation front. So the three of us are going to be doing the presenting and the talking. However, as I mentioned about the Q&A factor, you have got Kat Lazaro, Stefan Robledo, and Nicole Knight, who are in the chat available to answer any questions that you do have. So a couple of disclaimers first. So this session will be demonstrating functionality across predominantly the enterprise editions of ATS, analytics, and automation. Now, that's not to say that it's all completely irrelevant for anyone who is not on any of those sort of editions, or if they don't have one of them or anything like that. There are certain elements that can be done manually. If you're talking about automation, there are certain workarounds that you can have on the analytics front if you have, say, like Growth or Starter Edition. Although, to be fair, with ATS and CRM, you are pretty much going to need either corporate or enterprise to kind of facilitate the kind of the framework of what it is that we're going to be talking about. In terms of the content, one thing to mention is that we are using an internal database. So if you have certain names or job titles or company names or anything like that that look a little bit rogue, that would be because it is not real data. Also, the suggestions that we are going to be making on this session are more generic in our explanation of them. So there are certain things that you should be considering in your own systems. If you come away from this thinking, yeah, we want to implement that, please be aware that you should be taking considerations as to the specifics of your own system. Going word for word based off what we are talking about might actually cause some issues. So yeah, just make sure you're making the right steps ahead of time. So in terms of what we're actually going to cover on this session, one thing that we noticed from the last time we did this was we were very ambitious with the amount of sort of topics that we were going to try and cover. So this one we've scaled down ever so slightly, but allowing to spend a little bit more time for us to breathe and for people to actually understand what it is that we're trying to say. So on this, we're going to cover the automatic rejections and the timing out processes within jobs and submissions and things like that. And that is something that's going to cover ATS, analytics, and automation. We're going to cover lapsed and unused candidates, how to sort of reignite them, how to flag them, and all the rest of that. That also covers all three platforms. We're going to also we are going to discover together, but also going to discuss sources to do with application reporting, with like the likes of getting candidates in, things like that. That's going to cover ATS and analytics. Analytics and automation are going to cover bounce notifications. So when you try to email out and it does not go anywhere. And then finally, you're going to have something just on automation on its own, which is going to be discussing the new has changed functionality, something within candidate records at the moment that will track when changes to key fields have taken place. So first up is the automatic rejections and timing processes out. So the issue that we're trying to combat with this is that what we see a lot of is that recruiters will submit candidates to jobs. They might submit, say, 20 candidates to a job, and you're working, say, 10 jobs. So you've got a strong number of candidates technically in process, whether that's internally submitted or CV sent or whatever it is. A lot of the times when these kind of fall to the wayside, the administrative side of going back in to reject these candidates isn't really done. And on the same sort of kind of vein, you have the kind of a similar thing going on with jobs, in that if you have worked a job and it hasn't really gone anywhere, or you spoke to the client and they go, oh, we're putting it on hold, we'll speak to you again in a month, and it doesn't really go anywhere, a lot of times people aren't rejecting or closing these jobs down. What then ends up happening from a reporting perspective is that you get a lot of unrejected candidates, you get a lot of legacy jobs. So if you're trying to look at things like, oh, okay, what's our oldest job? Oh, it's this job from 2011 that we never closed down because, I don't know, the recruiter quit or something like that. So what we're going to try and do is talk through various ways using ATS, automation, using analytics to report on it, to kind of do that admin for you, to kind of tie the shoelaces of closing all of that down without having the need to go back and make sure I'm religiously checking over thousands or hundreds or dozens or one candidate that I need to reject or anything like that. So to start with, though, I will hand over to Adam, who will talk through the ATS side of things.
Thanks, Alex. Do you want to share your screen, Alex, and then we can talk about adding the rejection reasons?
We're in.
Perfect. Great. So what we're going to do here is just quickly go through how to add the new job statuses and rejection reasons so that they'll be in the ATS and automation can work with them. So Alex, if you could please go to admin, field mappings, and then job. And then in this database, we're using job tracks 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 actually in this one. So you want to expand each of those, and then we're going to go to the status field and then add timed out as an additional status, so you can filter for that. And for those of you using more than 3 tracks, you'd need to do this in 4 and 5 as well. The key is to always do it in job track 1 because that's your default. And then 2, 3, 4, and 5, any of those ones that you're using, you don't have to do it in those job tracks that are unused. Great, we'll save that. So now we've added the statuses to the job status field. The next thing we want to do is add the submission statuses so that those can be updated as well. So for this, we'll go into the system settings. So again, menu, admin, system settings. We'll search for job response status in that filter at the top. And the 2 fields we want here are job response status list, which is our overall list of submission statuses. So we want to get it added here. And then because this is a rejected status, we also want to add it under the rejected job response status section as well, so that it's not grouped at the top when you're changing the submission statuses, and instead it'll be under the move to rejected options and not cluttering that top list. So yeah, Alex, if you can save that, and then now we will have added both of those statuses so that automation can use them. And I'll hand it over to Tom for the automation portion.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, guys. So just kind of talking conceptually around what this piece is really looking at, I think everybody out there understands that probably the greatest bugbear for candidates engaging with recruiters is essentially falling into a black hole where they make an application and they just simply don't hear anything back. So automation does solve that problem for you really easily. So Alex, if you can just click into the auto reject candidates automation there. So what we'll do first is we'll just take the list criterion. Now, for the purposes of this webinar, I've really just built something which effectively tries to encompass all of the rejection reasons. So client rejected and rejected. So ideally what you do in this scenario is you would maybe have 3 separate automations which cover the application being rejected by a recruiter, the application being rejected by a customer after submission, and then a final one which would be rejected after interview. And you would change the verbiage in the correspondence in the email that you send through to reflect those circumstances. You can also see here that we've got a rejection based on the job being cancelled, effectively closed down. So cancelled and lost are the 2 statuses we've got listed here, but obviously in your instance, they may be different. But essentially, it's ensuring that nobody falls through the gaps. and everybody is aware of where they stand with their application. So yeah, you can just click out of that, Alex. Thank you. So if just want to sort of point something out here, if you were building an automation to reject candidates after interview, what we're really not suggesting that an automation replaces a recruiter actually going in and giving detailed interview feedback to the candidate. That's a very important part of the service that you guys provide. So what I would suggest here in that instance for that use case is you would have a wait step built in of maybe 3 to 4 days, just to allow ample time for the recruiter to actually put that call in to the candidate to give that detailed interview feedback. Alex, if you actually click into the send email here as well, just if you can just open the whole thing, thanks. Just something else to be aware of that I've added here. I mean, this is just kind of cobbled together quite quickly, this messaging. I'm sure you can make it look much better. But I just wanted to bring your attention to these job links here. Okay, so this is utilizing semantic job matching. Essentially, this is quite a good use case for utilizing semantic job matching, because effectively you're delivering bad news to the candidates, but what you're also trying to do is improve their experience and improve your chances of placing them. You would say something like, you know, I appreciate this is not the news you wanted to hear, but here are some other opportunities which may match your profile. So you're just maximizing the opportunity that you've still got of placing those candidates. So that's that part through. We'll also just look at auto closing jobs as well. So that's a different automation. Oh, where are we going here? Oh, okay. We can just do, yeah, let's just build it, Alex. So blank automation, job-based. Don't know where the one we had pre-built went. So just call it also close, webinar also close. And then we're going to create a new list. So essentially we might want to look at, yeah, so give it a title. Thanks, Alex. Okay, always updated. Okay, so we're going to say job date added.
Yeah,
we'll say more than 6 months ago, just for example. So if we basically wanted to close any job that has been open for more than 6 months, then we would save that as a list. Now, I appreciate you might not want to close every single job which has been open for more than 6 months. You might have a subsection of jobs which typically always just need to stay open, in which case you would create a separate list to highlight those jobs, whether that's via the job ATS ID or, you know, by job type, department, whatever it happens to be, and you would add that as a suppression list, which we won't go through there, but that's where you would add that in. And then essentially all we're doing is we're updating the job. Okay, and we're going to put job status and then move it to archive. And then end the automation. So that was a bit on the fly. We did have that pre-built, but it vanished. But that covers my section. So I'll hand back over to you, Alex.
thank you. So yeah, the purpose, as I said, of doing this is more around automatically beyond a period of time, these things have kind of lapsed and you want to do a little bit of tidying up just to keep data integrity relatively on track. Now, from an analytics perspective, the reporting is a little bit more after the fact, in the sense that, yes, we can track a load of reports on, okay, you have these number of jobs that have been open for 90 days, 120 days, however long it is that you want to be looking at it. But for the context of what Adam and Tom have been doing to effectively facilitate automation going in and taking that off your hands, the reporting I'm going to focus more on is around looking at the numbers of instances of this happening. So, for example, if I go into, say, Slice and Dice, and I look at something like the last 12 months, I can be looking at things like jobs added. Now, for reference, if you guys were on the last webinar that we did on this theme, we did also cover things like close date on jobs. So if you did have an automation that was saying, okay, well, I've put the job into archive or timed out or however you're going to term it. I'm also going to put today's date in there. Analytics can then recognize that date and say, right, okay, well, I want to see all of the jobs where that date of the job being closed falls in this week, this month, or whatever it is. So whilst in this environment that we've got, that's just a test one, really. I only have jobs added. I'll use that. Realistically, you'd want to probably use jobs closed. But I can do things like drag in job CRM status, say, right, okay, great. We had 3 jobs that were timed out if I'm dragging in that CRM status. So that is obviously why Adam at the start was mentioning, right, okay, well, we need to add these statuses in so that automation can effectively use them. So within here, there's a lot of different bits and bobs we can be doing. So you can start looking at, okay, within that, how many companies was it involved in? Great, we had 3 timed out jobs. It was with tech test. Or you can start to get into things like how long were they open on average? So if I go in average, using the insights drop downs on the left, I can say days open. Great. Okay. The average time was 312 days as opposed to field direct, which was 139, things like that. Now, a lot of the key reporting that comes into this is when I'm working with clients and they're saying, I want to see how long jobs are open for on average. So you have things like accepting candidates and you have a load of legacy jobs that haven't been closed down. That number's going to skyrocket because it's adding in a load of 365 days, 720 days, whatever it is. So it helps keep the data a lot tighter. Now, from a reporting perspective, dashboards is probably the most visceral module that we have on the platform. So yes, while Slice and Dice is very good for number crunching, if you were to go into something like, say, small data and do the same again. So if I go in for, say, jobs added, probably want to do something like the last 12 months just to make the data look a bit prettier. If I do something like I take owner out because I'm not particularly fussed who owned the jobs based on what status they were, and I drag status in instead, I can then do things like create graphs that illustrate these points. Or I say have a pie graph to go, okay, great. Those timed out jobs actually don't really account for many of the jobs that we have. If I sort the column, I can go back in. So then it's in number order. And I can say, great, okay, well, placed and field direct were the 2 most common statuses that we have of jobs that were added in the period. Timed out is actually down here, which is great. Cancelled is a bit higher, maybe not great, but you get the gist. In a similar vein, you can be doing things. So I go back to Slice and Dice quickly. There is also a metric called rejected candidates. So if I do the same again, what you can do is say, right, okay, in the time frame, there have been 60 candidates rejected, all thanks to this wonderfully subtly named test account. If I take owner up out of the way and I put in, say, CV sent type, that will then break it down to say, okay, great. Of the rejections that we've had, so we've had 60 rejections, 20 of them have been because the client has rejected them, 5 have been because they have just timed out. So we didn't actually really have any kind of real discernible feedback on them, or we did, and people just haven't filled it in. So I can be doing things like doing a sum as a fraction of total. So I can say, great, of our rejected candidates in that time, 8.3% were due to timeouts. If we had maybe like a bigger data set, as you guys will have done in the crowd, you can be adding things like, right, I want to see how that tracks over quarter to quarter to quarter, or month to month, or week to week, or whatever it is. I can start to drag in things like owner, which probably isn't going to be very helpful because they're all the same owner, or things like group, and see if there are certain teams where things like timed out a little bit more obvious than others. I can do things like filter to only show me the timed out ones, and then start to dig a little bit deeper to say, okay, is there a repeat offender, or does this happen more with certain companies, or whatever it is. Now, one of the other things I want to show before I hand over onto lapsed and unused candidates is that with this data, obviously it is in here, so there is more opportunities now within analytics to kind of make it malleable. So one thing I want to do is basically create a ratio. say, of my rejected candidates, I want to see what percentage of them are due to the fact that we just haven't done anything with them, rather than, I don't know, candidate rejected or they've declined an offer or whatever it is. That being said, you can still make that, but for the sake of what we're talking about here, I'll probably keep on track. So I go into edit metrics, discard those changes. If I find that rejected candidates metric that we were just using 3 dots on the right-hand side, I can duplicate the entire metric. I can then call it timed out candidates. And using the config tab, thanks to metric editor, I can go in and see how this specific metric is made up. So the previous one is just looking at all of the rejection reasons. So candidate not interested, rejected, blah, 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 blah. If I remove them from this list here, only leaving out that timed out metric status, if I hit save, I can then go into, say, ratios, and I can add a new ratio. And I go percentage of candidates rejected timed out. I'm sure you could probably think of better wording for this, but as I say, we're just making it up as we go along. So if I go timed out candidates, I can then say whether I want that a normal ratio, so 60:5 or whatever it is, or I can go something like percentage. So I then hit save. If I go into, say, OneView or dashboards or OnPoint, I can go in and say, right, okay, I want to have percentage of candidates timed out for just the entire business for last 12 months. And it will show me 8% because it will show me we had 60 who were rejected. I can click in, it'll give me the whole list, and it will say there were 5 that were due to being timed out. So just an extra layer of, right, okay, how much work is automation actually doing for us from an admin perspective, when from a rejection standpoint, we should probably be doing this ourselves to be able to enable better reporting. Because anything that automation is saying, oh, I have filled this out for you, I've rejected this candidate for you, means that there aren't other reasons like, oh, well, they were rejected because they didn't turn up to the interview because they said their bus caught fire or something like that. Now, that being said, I will pass over to Tom to talk about lapsed and unused candidates.
Thanks, Alex. Cool. So just want to sort of conceptually talk about this topic. So I think it's probably on the generous side to say that at least 80% of most agencies' candidates' ATS data is pretty much dead. It's unusable. The information that you hold on those candidates is very old. Essentially because nobody's been in contact with them for a significant period of time. Even when your recruiters are building very nice targeted Boolean searches and they're bringing up candidates who look like a good fit, if you're looking at a CV that the latest entry in there is from 2022 or possibly prior to, the typical behavior is that recruiters are going to move on to a candidate they can see more recent work history for. So the other thing that this is basically talking to 2 points really. So it's talking to really improving the health of the data, the relevance of the data, but it's also talking about maximizing the investment that you've already made from a financial perspective around your candidate acquisition costs. Candidates don't just magically appear in ATSs, as we all know. Each candidate has a cost in terms of the acquisition there as well. So this is a way that you can essentially mine the investment that you've already made in your candidate ATS data. Alex, if you can just take us into the lapsed candidates automation. So what we're really looking to do here, if we go into the list first of all, is we're looking at, we want to target essentially people that have had no activity for a certain period of time. And I've chosen 2 years here as being the benchmark, but you might want to move it to 3 or less than 2 years, whatever you feel is fitting. So we have a last date, note date, of more than 24 months ago. They don't have a submission for more than 24 months as well. And they have never been placed by you. We've also added in a subscription status so that when we send these out, your metrics actually correlate properly. So all of the people that are included in this automation have not unsubscribed to emails, which will mean that all of your metrics data, when you look at that in automation, will be correct. So what we're then looking to do is we're going to utilize an engagement to capture an updated CV. Okay, so when you go and build your engagements, you should all have an upload resume question available to you. If you don't, you can contact support to have that enabled, and also organize for the CVs to be also passed back into the ATS once you receive them. You'll see here that, again, just for mock-up purposes, this is very simple. All we're simply doing is asking people to update their resume with you. So when we go back to the actual automation itself, Alex, if you can, you'll see here we're making multiple attempts to actually contact these people. And I think in here we've maybe got 3 or 4. Now, if you've actually attempted 3 or 4 times to contact these individuals, you may want to archive people that have not actually responded to the survey. So you can either go and build a separate list, but which the criteria is not taking engagement. And you'd obviously select this lapsed candidates engagement, and then you can archive them either as part of this automation or by building a supporting information. The choice is yours. For the purposes of this one, we built it as a branch within this automation. But yeah, the idea here is clean the data, make sure you've got up-to-date workable candidates, but also, you know, an investment has been made in your candidate ATS database. Want to drive the recruiter's activity in the ATS, not on LinkedIn, not on job boards. All of those cost additional money, and this will go some way to doing that. You can get a list of all of the updated CVs sent to you as a CSV once a week. If you click into the automation settings there, scroll down. Sorry, it's in the engagement settings. I beg your pardon. I'm giving you a bum steer, but in the engagement settings, you can tick a box, which means that you'll be sent a list of all the updated resumes you receive through this once a week. That's my portion of that. So I'll hand over to Adam.
Great, thanks, Tom. All right, Alex, if you could switch into the ATS, please. So what we're going to do here, guys, is we're going to look at a few favorite searches that I've built to help you stay on top of lapsed candidates and making sure that candidates and contacts don't become lapsed in the first place. First thing we're going to do here in the candidate list is load a favorite that I built called No Submissions and No Notes Past Year. You can click into that. And then if you can click into the search criteria there. Now, what you'll see in here is this is a couple of search filters I've added. One is to say, I want to see any candidates that have never had a submission at all. We have never submitted them for any jobs, never done any work. And then down in the bottom in the advanced note search portion, we're saying, show me anyone who has no submissions and no note activity of any kind in the past year. So these are people the team has not been speaking to at all. One thing you'll notice that is different with this than the automation one is we can look for no submissions at all. We don't have a time frame on that to say no submissions in the past 12 months, 24 months. So you'd want to leverage automation if you want to include that time frame. But this is a good way to identify anyone who you really haven't had either any submissions and never considered them for a job or never had any notes on their record. You're only seeing 3 candidates here because it's a test database, but a good habit is to save this, and then you can either archive these candidates in bulk from the list view or reach out to them and distribute them to your team to start working with them. The next one we're going to look at here is the top candidates, no contact past 30 days. So what I've done here is I've built a tear sheet for myself of my top candidates. In this database, these are the candidates that we've placed at some point. You may be building this for specific niche candidates, candidates with certain skills that are hard to find and hard to fill, and you want to make sure that you're talking with them on a regular basis. So what we're doing here is we're saying, I want to keep track of my top candidates. I've added them to a tear sheet. And instead of going to the tear sheet list, we're searching by tear sheet membership directly from this candidate list view. This allows us to leverage all of the other search criteria that's available in this list view that we don't get out of the tear sheet list. And specifically here, what we're doing is we're looking at the advanced note search and we're saying, I want to see my top candidates that have not had any call activity, either outbound, inbound, or qualification calls within the past 30 days. If they got an email or left a message, that's not good enough because I really want to be talking to these guys on a regular basis. And then you can also add another filter for yourself there to specify that you want it to be by you. So you could add another filter for author. I haven't done this. I've just kept it in general for the entire team. But if you can close out of this search criteria, yeah, there, you'll see there's an author down in there. If you see there in the favorites, I built 3 of these favorites. So I've got no contact in the past 30 days, 60 days, and then 90 days. Those ones that are 90, those are a red flag. I want to get that on immediately. So I'm talking to those candidates because I haven't talked to them in a while. Now, I've done much of the same here in the contact list as well. So any salespeople or account managers, this is a great way for you to keep on top of your contacts and make sure that you're not going too long without communicating with them. So Alex, if you can click in the favorite here, and then you can load any one of those top contacts, maybe the past 30, 60 days, whichever one. And then click into the search criteria. You'll see it's the same filters that I've done here. I have added my top contacts to a tear sheet so I can easily find them at any point. And then I'm using the advanced note search to say, show me those ones that I haven't spoken with in 30, 60, 90 days. And then you want to make sure you're doing those outreach attempts so you can stay on top of that and keep that relationship strong. The next thing we're going to look at here is we're going to jump from the candidate and contact list over to the submission list, and we're going to look at silver medalists. This is something that was discussed during a webinar last year as well. We wanted to rehash this and show you how to do this from the submissions list itself. So there is a favorite here called silver medalists. And these are filters. Alex, if you can click into that status column there. Yeah. So we've added filters here to say, show me any candidate that got an offer, even if they later rejected, or got an interview. So they made it further along in that hiring process and they didn't actually get placed for that particular role. These are your silver medalists. And if you're not used to using the submissions list, I definitely recommend you incorporate it into your workflow. It's very powerful. It shows you every single submission that's ever been added, from the first one that was added to the database to a web response that came in 30 seconds ago. They're all here. Now, what we're doing is we're filtering to say, show me those candidates that made it further along in the hiring process. But what you would want to do next is when you're trying to find a candidate that's for a particular skill or role, you would either want to click into that job column, if you could do that, please, Alex, and then add a filter in there. So I see there's JavaScript in there. So you can focus on those candidates that have been submitted for Java jobs or JavaScript jobs in the past. You'll get a whole bunch more results when you're filtering your database. It's just a smaller sample size here. So this is one way you can focus on just the job title. Or Alex, if you click into the search box at the top left there, yeah, we can also click in that type in keywords portion at the top and search within there to find Java. Alex, if you could hover over that magnifying glass inside that window. This is the trick that you guys can use if you want to know where it will be searching for those keywords. So it will look within the title. So same thing like filtering from the list view, but it will also search other areas as well. Thank you.
Sorry, I've maybe zoomed in a little bit too close.
But this way we can at least read it. But this will let you know where, when you put Java into that box, it's going to be looking for that keyword. All right, so we just went over silver medalists and how to keep on top of your candidates and contacts. Alex, did you want to talk about the analytics portion?
Thank you. So from analytics perspective, annoyingly with the database that we have, there isn't a whole lot to showcase. A lot of it is going to be around what we found gets best results out in the market are more custom metrics. There are some rudimentary reportings that you can be doing. So if I'm looking at something like, say, candidate calls over, say, the last 12 months or last year or whatever you're picking, if I take owner up out of the way and I have it by each candidate, go, okay, this is the number of calls that the candidates have been having, you can do things like look at the last KPI date. So the last date that a note was logged for them, you can sort in order. So I go, right, okay, great. These guys here haven't had a call since the 10th of February. These guys haven't had a call since the 7th of May, the rest of that kind of thing. So that kind of basic reporting is available kind of for all of the editions, really. The annoying thing, if you are on starter or growth editions, is that because you don't have slice and dice, you'd have to effectively export your candidate calls metric. If you're looking for a custom time frame of from today to back to the start of last year, you effectively have to export the entire candidate calls list and use Excel to do the filtering for you. But as I said, probably the best traction that we've had is through custom built metrics. So it is possible to have them built looking at things like companies placed with in the last 12 months where none of the contacts have had a call, or candidates with no notes on them whatsoever for 6 months or more. or things like contacts with no notes for 12 months or whatever it is, that is probably where the best value lies. But it will be very much dependent on at what point each business deems a candidate or a contact lapsed. Obviously, there are things like data protection legislations to be keeping in mind. Perhaps these kind of measures are something good to put in place to make sure that you are keeping legitimate interest of your candidates and your contacts and things like that. But as I say, yeah, that would be very much dependent on client to client. So I will hand over to Adam again on sources.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Alex, could you do me a favor and launch I'll talk through it first. So guys, what we're looking at here is talking about sources of candidates to determine where you're spending your time, where you're getting your ROI. Alex, if you can click into the ATS and load the placement list, please. So what you'll see here when we load the placement list is we have a column available in this list view called candidate source. And this allows us to see for our placements, where did we originally find this candidate? So how did the candidate first get into their database? Did we find them from an external job board? Did they find us from an external search of some sort? Or was it a referral? But this will track where they're from. What this is not showing us is the submission source there, because there are two sources that we use in Bullhorn to track where that candidate was found. So Alex, if you could toggle over to the submissions list, please. And then click into favorites and then go to the, perfect. Yeah, go there. So in here in our submissions list, I've added two source fields and you'll see them over to the right-hand side. One is the candidate source and the other one that just has the source label is your submission source. So this is where did the candidate find us or where did we find them this time? The candidate source gets written to when the candidate first gets added to the database, and typically that does not get overwritten. We keep that so we can see where we found them. And then each time as they apply for new jobs or they're going to your website and then that web response is coming in, we can have it right as submission source to say where was the candidate found this time. So you'll see it, for instance, in this view, the candidate source shows the whole bunch of external sources. We've got Monster, Indeed, LinkedIn in there. And then in the submission source on the right-hand side, there's a whole bunch of candidate search and job matches. So these are examples of the team leveraging the database and not going to those external sources each time, and instead leveraging what you already have. So there's a lot of value behind tracking the submission source as well. This submissions list view lets you add both of those columns side by side. So what I've done in here is I've added filter for the status column to say, show me all of those submissions that were placed. Typically, you're going to want to put another time frame in here as well, so you can limit the sample size you're looking at, but it'll allow you to see where that candidate was originally found, as well as where did we find them this time. Now, if you're wanting to be able to view the submission source directly in the placement list, there is not a standard column for that, but you could potentially build an automation or a field interaction that would write that information into one of the placement fields, so then you could display both of those fields side by side. Now, one thing that does often happen is the submission source could potentially be hidden in your database. So if you're finding that your team is adding submissions and they're not being asked to put that source in each time, we can go to the field mapping and then hide that field so it's available to them. So yeah, we'll go to admin and into field mapping. And then in here, we've got a section for job submission. And then there's a source field right in here. So if in your database that field is hidden, we can unhide it, and you can also mark it as required so that your team is forced to put in a submission source each time, and you're able to track whether they found that candidate externally, whether they used it by searching the database, hopefully. So we just want to make sure that that field is available. And if you're finding that as web responses are coming in, the submission source is not being written on those web responses, that's where you want to work with your web developer and have them update your web page so that the submission source is getting written to consistently as those web responses come in. Okay, Alex, did you want to talk about the analytics portion of this?
Yes, please. So this is something that actually comes up quite regularly in my conversations with clients who are looking to track the ROI, both of their things like their job boards when you're trying to find candidates, but also trying to really forge out a clear path to see what the ROI of Bullhorn is. Because, yeah, as Adam mentioned, we can easily be tracking things like the original sources of candidates. Now, if you've placed a candidate that has been on the system for, say, 5 years, yeah, okay, the original source was maybe LinkedIn, but you have gone to Bullhorn to find that. So keeping that internally. Now, the submission source factor is probably the single greatest way to enable that. So I would wholeheartedly recommend that for everyone trying to find ROI on Bullhorn. But if you are looking to see what the ROI of things like your job boards are, because obviously you have quite an extensive outlay and that side as well, using analytics to do things like looking at, say, new candidates added from the last 12 months or last 90 days by accident. 5, that's probably not that impressive. Let's go last 12 months. I can be taking things like owner up out of the way, and you have source. So when you see on analytics a column called source, it will just be source, just the one word. That is always the candidate source. So if you're looking at, say, first interviews or total placements or total revenue or whatever it is, whenever you see the source column, that is the source of the candidate originally. So whatever is in that source field on the candidate record. So new candidates added in the last 12 months, I can see that the most is from corporate website, followed by LinkedIn. Again, I can be using graphs to illustrate this point and things like that. Now, from an ROI perspective, obviously corporate website is proving its worth. From just an added perspective, obviously you maybe not placing these candidates. So similar kind of vein, if you were to add, say, a small data tile, I can go into total placements for the same time frame. And again, do the same thing, take owner up out of the way, find source, put source in and say, okay, great. So whilst corporate website is number 1, it's joint number 1 there. Referral is 3rd, but it's joint number 1. Indeed is joint 2nd and is joint 3rd. So you can start to weigh up, okay, great. Okay, these are the sources. This is resulting in this number of placements. You can do things like you can actually add them together. So I'm going new candidates and total placements. I can stack them in a table. I can do things like have analytics, put them in graphs side by side to say, okay, great. This is where they sit. So really referral, I'm probably getting better ROI, considering it's also free compared to the corporate website, things like that. Now, from an actual hard numbers perspective, I can do the same thing again, but with, say, total sales. I typed it incorrectly. Total sales. Do the same thing again. Take owner up out of the way. Put source in, and I can see, okay, great. LinkedIn actually equate, whilst LinkedIn wasn't near number 1 in either of them really, you can see LinkedIn actually equated to the most amount of revenue written. So from an ROI perspective, great. Okay, I'm seeing good value there as opposed to corporate website where we did a lot of deals, but we didn't actually write a lot of revenue. So yeah, just as simple as that, really. So I will hand over to what turns out to be myself with bounce notifications. So bounce notifications is quite a quick one. This actually follows on relatively similarly to something that we covered in the last webinar again, where we mentioned about candidates and contacts with no email addresses. What bounce notifications do, especially within automation, is effectively you've sent an email out, it has not worked. So you'll get the bounce back saying, oh, this email address does not exist, or whatever it is. Obviously, that is effectively the same redundant data as having no email address. So yeah, from an analytics perspective, it is very similar in that we can be going on to analytics and saying, okay, great. How many candidates, contacts don't have email addresses? If you're having automation clear that field. But really the kind of the key benefits you're going to get is probably from automation. So on that front, I'll hand over to Tom.
Thank you, Alex. Cool. So we just go into automation again, please. So there are, a couple of things to be aware of here and a couple of nuances based around your communications, whether or not they're going to candidates or clients, and a few kind of similarities on both fronts as well. So if we go into the bounce notifications, so what we'll take a look at first, as always, is we'll take a look at the list. Now, I mean, this is really just for demo purposes. But what you can see here is we're looking at how or whether or not people have actually engaged with any email content. So the list criteria being has activity, and the activity is bounce. Bounce type is hard. Now, you can see here we've got a very large number of records, 37, nearly 38,000 records here. So this is across within our demo environment, but this is across any email. So if you click on the any email highlighted there in blue, please, Alex, you'll see here that you can actually start to specify if you want to check for bounces across certain email campaigns. That may take a while to load. You can use the drop down there and it'll just bring up a list of all the various emails. So this demo is really around all hard bounces across any across all email sendouts. So you can see here we've also added the subscription status is not subscribed here. So if you click out of that, please, and go into the automation, I want to just call out a couple of things. So we have a wait step in here. The wait step is 3 days. So I did see in the chat before there were some questions around wait steps. With this particular example, there are 37, nearly 38,000 records. So we've added a fairly significant wait step here to allow all of those records to enter the automation, just in case anybody's wondering why that wait step is in there. Then we have a notification step. So this is a kind of slightly contentious one here. So if you're doing a candidate-based automation based around hard bounces, we wouldn't necessarily recommend that you notify the candidate owner every single time there is a hard bounce here. Simple reason for that is they're basically going to end up with sort of notification fatigue. They'll ignore the notifications that come through from automations. And most importantly, they're not really sort of high value notifications for the recruiters to receive. I would make the point, though, if you're sending email campaigns out to sales contacts, if this was a sales contact-based automation, there probably is a great deal more value in notifying the sales contact owner, because they would need to go and correct that information for submissions, for marketing communications, so on and so forth. So it's entirely up to you whether or not you want to have a notification step in there, but I would say there are going to be far too many notifications flooding the recruiters' inboxes here. The most important thing you're actually trying to do through this exercise is you're trying to collect the correct information. So you can see here we've got another send engagement step. Click into that, and what you'll see here, you've got a mobile phone symbol. Obviously, we're not going to try and collect updated information via email here because we've already had a bounce. So you're using the SMS notification step there to try and correct and improve that data. So yeah, the key message is here: internal notifications recommended if these are sales contact-based automations, not necessarily candidate-based automations. And the key thing you're really trying to drive here is the engagement being sent out to correct that and update that information for you using an automation. That's me. So I think we're now going to talk about the has changed feature, which I'm just going to talk to you guys briefly about. So the has changed feature is something that's really just been put out to release, I think, for about the last kind of 6 to 8 weeks, something around there. And it's really a way for any agency to be notified around key status changes or key bits of information that have changed. So really it's being used in 2 main ways at the moment. The major way it's being used is really in a reactive sense. So it's flagging up any changes to key bits of information. So and being utilized by middle or back office around people that have been placed into roles, and maybe an important bit of information like somebody's name or their address or banking details, whatever it happens to be, have actually changed, and back or middle office actually need to be made aware of that. From a more proactive point of view, the has changed status can be used for things like somebody's availability has changed, which might then result in a call to action elsewhere. If you go into the automation that we've just mocked up here as well, please, Alex. So we've done an address has changed. So we'll go and have a look at the list. And the thing to call out here is you're probably going to want to build out separate has changed automations across different types of changes. So what I mean by that is this list here is focused around changes to somebody's address. So we've got the zip code. This is how it's configured in our demo environment, but we've got address line 1. You may have a full address field there. And obviously we're highlighting the fact that these are previous placements as well. But you might want to build these lists out for, first name, surname, so on and so forth. And then if you click out of that, Alex, and we go into the notification again, it was just a very quick mock-up. But this is a notification to more than likely somebody in the back office to say, please review the ATS record to be aware of changes. And obviously any other documentation or address changes which are part of any sort of ongoing workflow with the candidate. Yeah, and that's really just what I wanted to call out with the has changed feature. Oh, sorry, final thing to mention as well is that this is really just relevant to, this is only available on the candidate record at the moment, but in terms of our product roadmap, this is going to be rolled out to cover, I believe, jobs and placements are next on the list, but then will be available across all of the entity types moving forward.